Well, there are some players out there that have been put on the pup list, but that could mean fantasy value for you on today's edition of the Audible. We're going to start with one of our favorite players, maybe of all time, Bloom, and Nick Chubb. So, fantasy drafts going on right now. I did one Sunday. We've got one on Wednesday. Like, all right. So you're seeing where Chubb is falling to what people are thinking, but now we know officially Nick Chubb's on the pup. He's going to miss some time, but when he comes back, that's where the value can come in for your fantasy team.
This is a good place to do a refresher on VBD, Joe Bryant. Mayor Football Guys also revolutionized fantasy football back in the 90s with value based drafting, which really stood for the idea that a player isn't worth his total points. A player is worth how many points he produces over a replacement. And in this case, when we value Nick Chubb, let's say we get Nick Chubb, even if we get 80% of Nick Chubb, for the second half of the season. Well, 80% of Nick Chubb getting the touchdowns, and there are other elements here. How's Deshaun Watson going to play? How's the offensive
Right.
line going to hold up after a lot of injuries last year? But 80% of Nick Chubb for half of the season. And remember, Adam Harstad, our mega brain football guys analyst, tells us that the most important weeks of the fantasy football season are the final weeks, the weeks in the playoffs. So holding on to Nick Chubb and all of these players we're going to talk about can absolutely give you rewards that are worth clogging up your roster spot at the end of your bench while you wait for them to get better. And I think Nick Chubb sees the other thing is there's always a human element of fantasy football. And Nick Chubb has already come back from a catastrophic knee injury to the same knee. And we saw Frank Gore overcome 2 ACL tears when that was a death knell for a player's career. So don't you want to live in a world where Nick Chubb can overcome physiology? He's already done it once. I think he's going to do it again. And when you look at the roster moves that the Browns made, they're expecting him to do it again. They didn't
Right.
add anyone of consequence. Deontay Foreman, that's it, who he has a rib injury. And I guess we have to mention Jerome Ford here.
Sure.
Jerome Ford was much better than I think folks expected last year. Remember, he was an Alabama recruit. He was a very highly recruited player, ended up at Cincinnati, but you saw him last year in the passing game. You saw him, I think, better than folks expected as an early down runner. And Kareem Hunt's role was smaller, I think, than people expected whenever Hunt was signed. Now, with Foreman a little banged up with a rib issue, Pierre Strong a little banged up with a rib issue, Jerome Ford's probably going to be in my top 25 running backs to start the season.
Well, and Bloom, here's the thing with Nick Chubb and the rest of these players, but Chubb specifically, Windows, there's that
Mhm.
conversation again. And also, like, you can figure it out. You can figure it out. Your stars and superstars in fantasy are most likely going to equal each other out, right? So it's about drafting in the mid rounds, it's drafting in the late rounds. And when you can get Nick Chubb at a value, and yeah, you're not going to have him to begin the season. You don't need him to the begin the season. You can figure it out then. And then when you need him, i.e., fantasy playoffs or, that push for the playoffs, that's when you have Nick Chubb and hopefully a full strength Nick Chubb during that time. And you also have, with this offense specifically, you have the fact that if Deshaun's not playing well, they got a guy. They got the guy behind him that we all love and famous Jameis. Like, yeah, okay, you got a guy. You're fine. If Deshaun's not playing well, other teams we can't say that. If the quarterback's not playing well, there's other teams we can't say, oh, they can go to a Jameis Winston. No, you'll be more than fine if Winston has to play instead of Watson.
Yeah, that's another thing we need to incorporate here is if Deshaun Watson gets hurt or if Deshaun Watson struggles, this offense is insulated from that being disastrous. They don't have to hope that Joe Flacco is available again because, well, he's insulating the Colts offense from anything disastrous happening.
Yes, and boy, that's a whole other conversation if we want to talk about Anthony Richardson and Joe Flacco and the Colts. But let's move on from that and talk about TJ Hockenson. We know everyone's out there looking for tight end help, and there is help out there. Isaiah Likely, everyone, Isaiah
Mm.
Likely, get Isaiah Likely. But if you're looking for tight end help, perhaps you are set with your starter. You grab TJ Hockenson as a backup. Again, value for your fantasy squad.
I love the late round tight end strategy this year because it incorporates PJ Hawkinson. And
Hmm.
we've heard consistently that Hawkinson won't be back until week 6, week 8. But once he is back, he's going to go right back to being a central part of this passing game. And they don't have an established number 3 wide receiver. Jalen Naylor, who's got some deep speed and maybe some chops in the deep passing game, has won the number 3 wide receiver job. Jordan Addison's the number 2. Obviously, Justin Jefferson's going to get as much as he can handle. Aaron Jones, a very good receiver out of the backfield. But there's no reason to think that after the 2 or 3 week ramp up, that TJ Hockenson will get right back to where he was last year, which was right there with Travis Kelce, Sam Laporta, Trey McBride after Zach Ertz went down, about 15 points a game in a PPR league. So you're talking about getting a tight end 1 for the second half of the season in the 10th, 11th, 12th round. And then in the meantime, like you said, Cease, bet on yourself. All of these kinds of strategies mean you're betting on yourself as a fantasy GM to make the right late round picks, to make the right waiver wire picks, to make the right lineup choices. And you're expanding the ceiling of your roster because you can't get a tight end 1 in the 11th, 12th round, but you know you can with TJ Hockenson. In the meantime, some of the names, guys like Jonnu Smith, Tucker Kraft has really come on. Watch out for him. Even someone like Greg Dulcich. You can try out some players. You're not going to have a lot of competition on the waiver wire. Here's another part of the strategy. This is becoming a tight end drafting strategy show, Cease.
I love it.
Because tight end is so deep this year, okay, there's the top tier. There's Laporta, Kelsey, McBride, Andrews. There's Kincaid. There's Pitts, Ingram, Kittle, Ferguson, Brock Bowers, Dallas Goddard. I just got to 11. This one goes to 11. What does that tell you? Nobody's going to be that interested in waiver wire tight ends. They're going
Yep.
to be pretty happy with what they have. So you're not even going to, hey, maybe you miss. Maybe you take TJ Hockenson and 2 late round tight ends and you miss. Neither of your late round tight ends hit in week 1 or week 2. You're going to get to pick up the guys who did hit pretty cheaply because you won't have competition. And then here comes TJ Hockenson around Halloween to save your season.
Yeah, and I think that's also another layer of strategy, Bloom, is like, okay, the rest of your league's going to be fine at this position. Your waiver wire, if there's somebody hot, they're not going to be as hot as that hot running back
Right.
that we usually see, or maybe a wide receiver. I'm super old, so I'll go back to the Anquan Bolden. Oh my God.
Yeah.
Although in the Colorado Pigskin League, my buddy Mark Baca drafted Anquan Bolden. We all thought he
Mm.
was nuts. I think
Mm-hmm.
it was an auction back then, but anyway, so it's like, yeah. So now with the tight ends being so full, which is kind of odd, um, your waiver wire is going to be more robust for you.
Yeah. In Hawk we trust.
Yes, that's right. Keaton Mitchell, we got to move on the conversation, talk about Keaton Mitchell, a little bit less than some of these other guys, but some value there, certainly some speed and big playability. And Mitchell is also another player put on the pup list.
I think we've learned that it wasn't a simple ACL injury. It didn't look like a simple ACL injury whenever he went out last year. They're going to take their time with Keaton Mitchell. And where this leads us back to is Justice Hill. And then Derrick Henry's
Mhm.
the guy. Derrick Henry, 20 rushing touchdowns. Derrick Henry, 1,500 rushing yards. I think these are reasonable numbers for him. We do have to watch, quick aside on the Ravens offense. There is some new names on the offensive line. The Ravens are probably the best team in the NFL at next man up on the offensive line. But, and he did just, I guess this is a moment to say, I always feel so strange to go serious in the middle of this stuff because we're talking about fantasy football, which is so unserious. But the team did lose their offensive line coach, uh, Joe. I don't want to butcher his name to in memory of him. But this team has gone through a lot on the offensive line. So the first few weeks with some new names, Joe Dallasandris, Joe Dallasandris, one of the best. And it was pretty quick. I think things escalated, and just want to take a moment out to remember him as this team as this happened. Remember, the Steelers lost their wide receiver coach right before the season a few years back. Like you just got to trooper on, and this team's going to trooper on with probably a new right tackle, new right guard, a center, Linderbaum, who hasn't really practiced. Will Ronnie Stanley stay healthy? So maybe at the beginning of the year, the Ravens offense could have a few hiccups. But as they get going, this should be one of the most productive offenses in the league. And Justice Hill on the field for 40% of the snaps, 2-minute drills, passing situations. Hey, at running back, that could be someone viable. And if Derrick Henry misses time, now you're looking at Justice Hill because they trust Justice Hill. They know Justice Hill. He's been in the building for a long time. And we even saw last year, remember, that early on, he was actually getting touchdowns ahead of Gus Edwards. So I do think that Justice Hill's a name for us to remember here. Rasheen Ali is probably the number 3 running back for now, the 5th round pick, but he was banged up during camp. They wanted Owen Wright, a 2023 undrafted free agent, to be the guy, but I think he went down with a leg, foot injury. So they may be in the market after cut downs for another running back, which I think just reinforces that the 2 guys they trust are Henry and Hill.
Yes, Henry and Hill. And do you know where I saw Rasheen Ali?
Mm.
The Shrine Bowl.
Gulp, gulp.
There you go. Gulp, gulp. Indeed. Jonathan Brooks has incredible talent. And in fact, if he was healthy, Bloom, you could easily say he was the best running back in this class. I still love Marshawn Lloyd. I guess we can talk about Marshawn Lloyd in this segment too, as we've got just a couple players left and going over pup players that can provide value for your fantasy team. That's a lot of P's. The arsonist had oddly shaped feet. Let's talk
Mm.
about Jonathan Brooks and how, I mean, there is legit star potential. He's just got to be healthy.
Mm.
And it's interesting to note how things, Joe always says, we love Joe Bryant. He says things change quickly around here. Well, the narrative on Bryce Young is now like, oh, yeah, pretty good. It's not like Bryce Young was a slappy, okay?
No.
Now, maybe his owner is. And oh, the jokes I could tell off air about what people think in the league of Dave Tepper. But like Jonathan Brooks, we clearly know has the skill. Young will be better because he's better than he was last year. They put better players around him. And now it's time to just wait and see what Jonathan Brooks can do when he is healthy.
Very similar to Nick Chubb, outlook wise, went a little earlier than Nick Chubb. I think we saw Brooks' ADP slide after Canales said, yeah, week 3, week 4 at the earliest. And now we're looking at week 5 at the earliest. And this is more out of caution. And I think it's just smart. This is your running back of the long term, a lead back, a 3-down back. The Panthers are not contending for, maybe they could get in the playoffs. I don't know, but it's not part of the plan. You're not putting the pedal to the metal. You're not pushing this year. Not with Tampa, not with Atlanta in your division. It's really hard to see them overcoming either of those teams. So take it slow. And unlike Chubb, Brooks really might be closer to full speed because of the recuperative powers of his youth.
Hmm.
And we'll see how well Chuba Hubbard plays. If Chuba Hubbard plays as well as he did last year, he's not just going to be swept aside for Brooks. And just as much as it made sense for them to err on the side of caution with Brooks on the NFI list officially because the injury didn't happen while he was an NFL player, it didn't happen as part of his NFL football duties. Uh, then why wouldn't they make this a committee in the second half of the year? I do think that Brooks offers enough upside that he's worth carrying, just like Chubb is worth carrying. But Chuba Hubbard's performance is the variable that we have to watch for here to maybe slow down the impact and the arrival of Brooks because Hubbard was the one bright spot in this offense last year.
Yeah, and they'll take anything they can get. So we'll continue to wait on that. And Carolina is one of those teams, and I have a man crush on Xavier Legette. I think you and I don't see Legette the same way, but he's the player that I think bailed out Spencer Rattler, who I know had a big week 3 for the Saints, and that was a beautiful pass. That was a
they're
beautiful
already
pass.
they're already talking bench Carr. We want Rattler. That's New Orleans for you.
Oh my goodness, maybe. Maybe lay off the sugary drinks.
Watch what you wish for. Yeah.
Right, 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 right. Watch what you wish for if you're the Patriots, because I guess you wished for this group of wide receivers. How do they have this group of wide receivers? Like, all due respect to Kendrick Bourne, who we're going to talk about in this segment, and maybe he'll come back. And there's conversation. We just were poking fun with Spencer Rattler. Like, okay, Drake May has been kind of an opposite turn there. It's like beginning of training camp, May was really rough. Looked like it's going to be Jacoby, and May's going to need some time. End of training camp and end of the preseason, we can say, well, I don't know. May's looked better. He's grasping things. He certainly has the physical tools. Nobody's questioning that whatsoever. He can throw his big arm. He can run all over the place. And what does he match up with Kendrick Bourne? That's the thing here. But the Patriots, the conversation's changing. Not the conversation about the wide receivers, Bloom, because the guy's not named Kendrick Bourne. It's a little rough. So
Yeah,
you like Drake May in Dynasty. Hope that they get better players around him. One of
yeah,
those will be a healthy Kendrick Bourne.
right. Who should be the number one receiver when he's healthy. But
Mm.
when is that going to be? Week 6, week 8. In the meantime, there's second round pick Jalen Polk. There's Demario Douglas and Pop Douglas. Where'd you see him, Cease?
Shrine Bowl.
Shrine Bowl. Eric Galco, what's up, man? He's the one guy that I feel certain can shake his coverage. Right?
Always open.
That's the guy, right? 7-11. That's the guy early. Polk, we'll see. Tyquan Thornton stretch the defense, not merely fantasy value, but if there's a way this pass offense can be functional. Hunter Henry, all of these guys are going to play roles in this pass offense. And then Kendrick Bourne is going to complicate it. And you're right, Cease, the more interesting conversation about the Patriots has nothing to do with fantasy. Really, Ramondre Stevenson's the only player on the Patriots, and Drake May in super flex leagues that I'm interested in right now. The question is whether to play, and this is, as we used to say, a Thursday night kind of topic. Do you put Drake May out there? Is he? And this is one of those things where I think you have to look into his soul, look into Drake May's soul, because is he the kind of player that needs to learn on the job? And he will incorporate all those limitations and all of what he learns to become a wiser and better quarterback, or we'll put him out there with this offensive line without guys who can really win downfield and shake NFL coverage. Is it going to imprint bad habits? Is it going to make him see ghost? Is it going to turn him into David Carr, Sam Darnold, these quarterbacks who have to deal with so much adversity early in their career that they don't get their development on track? It's a tough question. I'm glad I'm not the one that has to make the call there.
Well, Robert Kraft's going to be the one to make the call.
Uh,
Unfortunately, Gerard Mayo doesn't have that power because if he did, they wouldn't have drafted Drake May.
right.
Not that Drake May doesn't have talent, but it's a forced issue.
Is that why you hear Jared Mayo saying, "Oh, the quarterback job is going to go to who the better player is. Oh, Drake May is the better player. Oh, well, maybe the quarterback job isn't going to go to whoever the better player is." Oh, poor Jared Mayo.
Yeah, it's like I believe Mayo can be a good head coach in this league. But man alive, when you have ownership stepping in like that,
Yeah.
we've seen it countless times. It just creates problems. Almost when the owner's wrong or
Mm-hmm.
has to go to the second guy or the third guy. Mike McDaniel will bring up our
Yeah.
barista friend again. Like when you have to go to that guy, like, okay, I guess we'll just go with it. And then it works. Yeah, owners, you can step out of the way and let guys like Gerard Mayo do their thing.
Yeah. Let football people make football decisions.
Yeah, I think the last Gerard Mayo thing I heard, Bloom, was like, this is a lot closer than I thought.
Mm.
So maybe that lends into
Mm-hmm.
the Robert Kraft making his wishes be known, besides dancing in front of a green screen with his girlfriend, which is still bizarre. Bizarre.
How bizarre.
How bizarre indeed. You want to help out the show? Well, it's footballguys.com. That's where you go. Grab a subscription. We appreciate you all for doing that. It's a great price. You're going to get tens of thousands of pages during the regular season to help dominate your fantasy league. It's one place, footballguys.com. And if you want a taste of what we do at footballguys.com, you can sign up for our free daily newsletter every day, hot and fresh to your inbox. And that means every day. Every day, hot and fresh, takes written by Bob Harris, Ceceil Lammy, third person, Sigmund Bloom, Joe Bryant. Let's make it happen. It's our free daily newsletter available at footballguys.com. He is Sigmund Bloom. You follow him on Twitter X at Sigmund Bloom. I am at Ceceil Lammy. The show is at The Audible. Make sure to watch these videos wherever they're at, Bloom. Floating heads. They're over here. So watch these videos. Subscribe to our YouTube channel. Like, comment, share, subscribe. Thanks for watching. Stay tuned. And would you please stay frosty?